Hello, let's continue to chapter 11. Chapter 11. Who stole the tart? The king and the queen of hearts were seated on their thrones when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them, all sorts of little birds and beasts. As well as the whole pack of guards, the knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment. In the another, in the other, in the very middle of the court was a table with a large dish of star evening. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. I wish that get trial done, she thought, and hand round the refreshment. But there seemed to be no change of this, so she began looking about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in the books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there. That's the judge, said she said to herself, because of his great weight. The judge, by the way, was the king, as he wore his crown over the wig. He did not look at all comfortable and was certainly not becoming. And thus the jury box had out. And those 12 creatures, she was obligated to say. Creatures, you see, because some of them were animals and some were birds. I suppose they are the jurors. She said this last word 2 or 3 times over to herself, being rather proud of it, for the thought, and rightly too, that very few little girls of her age knew the meaning of it all, of it all. However, jurymen would have done just as well. The 12 jurors were all writing very busily on slates. What are they all doing? Alice whispered to the Griffin. They can't have anything to put down yet, before the trials begin. Okay, this illustration. Next. They're putting down their names, the Griffin whispered in reply, for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial. Stupid things, Alice began in a loud, indignant voice, but she stopped hastily, for the white rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" The king put on his spectacles, looked anxiously around to see who was talking. Alice could see, as well as if she were looking over their shoulders, that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slates, and she could even make out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that he had to ask his neighbor to tell him a nice model their slates will be in before the trial's over, thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil that square. This, of course, Alice could not stand, and she went around to the court and got behind him, and very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill the lizard, could not make out at all what had become of it. So, after hunting all about for it, he was obligated to write white with one finger for the rest of the day, and this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate. "Herald, read the accusation," said the king, on this. The White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the drum, and then unrolled the parchment scroll, and read as follows. The Queen of Hearts, she met some Tarts, all on a summer day. The knaviest of her, he stole the tarts, and took them quite away. Consider your fair day, the king said to the jury. Not yet, the rabbit hastily interrupted. There's a great deal to come before that. Call the first witness, said the king, and the rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet and called out first witness. The first witness was the hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. I beg pardon, your majesty, he began, for bringing this in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for. You ought to have finished, said the king. When did you begin? You begin. The hatter looked at the March hare who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was, he said. 15th, said the March hare. 16th, said the Dormouse. Write that down, the king said to the jury, and the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates on their slates, and then added them up, and reduced the answer to shilling the pants. Take off your hat. The king said to the hatter. It isn't mine, said the hatter. Stolen, the king exclaimed, turning the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. I kept them to sell, the hatter added as an explanation, of none of my own. I'm a hatter. Here the queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. Give your evidence, said the king, and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot. This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at Just at this moment Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court, but one second thought she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her. I wish you wouldn't squeeze so, said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to me. I can hardly breathe. I can't help it, said Alice meekly. I'm growing. You've no right to grow here, said the Dormouse. Don't talk nonsense, said Alice more boldly. You you know you're growing too. Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, said the Dormouse, not in that ridiculous fashion, and he got up very softly and crossed over to the other side of the court. All this time the queen had never left off staring at the hatter, and just as the Dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, "Bring me the list of the singer in the last concert," on which the wretched hatter trembled so that he shook off both his shoes. "Give your evidence," the king repeated angrily, "or I'll have you executed, whether you're nervous or not." "I'm a poor man, your majesty," said the hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so, and what with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkle of the tea." "The twinkle of what?" said the king. "It began with the tea," the hatter replied. "Of course twinkle begins with the tea," said the king sharply. "Do you take me for a dunce? Go on." I'm a poor man, the Hatter went on. A mustang twinkle after that. Only the March Hare said. I didn't, the March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. You did, said Hatter. I deny it, said the March Hare. He denies it, said the king. Leaves out that part. Well, at any rate, the Dharma said. The Hatter went on looking anxiously around to see if he would deny it too, but the Dharmas denied nothing, being fast asleep. After that, continued the Hatter, I cut some more bread and butter. But what did the Dharma say? One of the jury asked. That I can't remember, said the Hatter. You must remember, said the king, or I'll have you executed. The miserable Hatter dropped his teacup and and bread and butter, and went down on one knee. I'm a poor man, your majesty, he began. You're a very poor speaker, said the king. Here one of the guinea-pigs cheered, and was immediately suppressed by the officer of the court. As that is rather a hard word, I will just explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag with tied up at the mouth with string. Into this they slipped the Janipede at first and then said Eugene. I'm glad I've seen that one, thought Alice. I've so often read in the newspaper at the end of trials. There was some time to applause, which was immediately surprised by the officer of the court, and I never understood what it meant till now. If that's all you know about it, you may stand down, continued the king. I can't go no lower, said the Hatter. I'm on the floor as it is. Then you may sit down, the king replied. He heard the other Janipede cheered, and was surprised. Come, that finished the Janapedes, thought Alice. Now we shall get one on better. I'd rather finish my tea, said the Ratter, with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. You may go, said the king, and Hatter hurried left the court, without even waiting to put his shoes on, and just take his hat off outside. The queen added to one of the officers, but the Hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. Call the next witness, said the king. The next witness was the Duchess' cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was, even before she got into the court by the way the people near the door began sneezing all at once. Give your evidence, said the king. Shan't, said the cook. Evidence mo. Kesaksian mo. Yes, bukti mo. The king looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness. Well, if I must, I must. The king sat blankly air. After folding his arms and frowning the coal till his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in deep voice, What are tarts made of? Pepper, mostly, said the cock. Treacle, said the sleepy voice behind her. Cooler that dormouse. The queen shrieked out. The head that dormouse turned the dormouse out of court, surprised him, pinched him off with his whiskers. For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, getting dormouse turned out, and by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. Never mind, said the king, with an air of great relief. Call the next witness. And he added in undertone to the queen, Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quiet makes my forehead ache. Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like, for they haven't got much evidence yet. She said to herself, imagine her surprise when the white rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice, the name Alice. That's all. Stop share. It's the final of 11, chapter 11. So thank you.